The footage you're seeing right now is being shot on my new favorite camera from Canon, the EOS C70. In 4K, 422, 10-bit, everything you could ever imagine. This camera, in my opinion, is the upgrade that I always wanted from my old favorite camera, the Canon 1DC. Throughout this video, I will be answering some of the questions that you guys had about the C70. Also, a quick tease, we're putting out a competition with iJustine and Armando Fiera that was a ton of fun comparing the iPhone and the Alexa, so make sure to subscribe and enable bell notification so that you can see that video. All right, back to me in front of a mountain. All the way back in 2012, Canon released this camera, the 1DC, which took all the high-end features that filmmakers wanted, like 4K, unlimited recording, and a log image, and crammed it into a DSLR body.
At 24 frames a second, we're shooting at 4K, which is unheard of for a DSLR camera.
The only problem was, when this camera was released, it was $15,000. And people like us who make films on an indie budget could never afford a camera like this. That's what made DSLRs so attractive. They were super cheap for the image quality that we were getting out of a 5D Mark II at the time. Unfortunately, the only people that got these were people making movies and Philip Bloom. I lusted after this camera for years, and I know many other people did as well, and because the price point was so high, it was just unattainable for most of us. But as time went on, this camera became more and more of a dinosaur, and the prices began to plummet. I've actually owned 3 in the last 5 years. The image is fantastic. Even in 2020, the 4K image that you can get out of this is amazing. It's 8-bit, but it's 422, and the codec is awful. It's motion JPEG, but the footage looks beautiful. I loved this camera even though it was outdated, and I wanted an upgrade to this camera for years, but Canon never gave it to us. Enter 2020 and the new Canon C70, which is filming this footage. In my opinion, I feel the C70 is finally the upgrade that I've been waiting for from this camera. It takes what we originally loved about the old school DSLR form factor and merges that with professional video features like ND, a flip screen, continuous autofocus for video, and a whole bunch of other things that we're going to talk about in this video. I am super pumped about this camera, and if you're a Canon fanboy, or especially a 1DC fanboy, the 1DC, the best camera of all time. This camera is pretty dang exciting. Clint K asked, do the different recording file types to different card slots allow for a more productive proxy workflow? Yes, absolutely. In fact, because this camera has 2 card slots, you can record anything you want to either one of those cards. It doesn't have to be just proxy or 10-bit. You can actually do 8-bit 4K or 10-bit 4K. In our case, we like to use proxy on one card and the full, extra everything 10-bit on the other card. Essentially, proxy is a low quality version of your file that allows any computer really to be able to view it. It's super low res MP4, and that's actually the workflow that we use here at Indie Mogul. So this camera is perfect for our type of work. So I was just filming and I was like, oh shoot, my autofocus isn't working. And that's because right here where my hand naturally rests, default, is a button called AF lock. So be on the lookout of that. So let's talk about frame rates with this camera. This camera can do 4K at 120 frames per second in the HEVC mode. Now, a lot of you guys are probably gonna wanna shoot most of your normal footage like this in the MXF mode, but you have to crank it down to HEVC to get 10-bit 422 4K at 120 frames per second. That's a mouthful. This camera is really great because once you go into that mode, you have the ability to do the slow and quick setting, which conforms the slow motion in camera, but you don't have any audio attached to it. If you want to have some audio attached to the video, you can do that if you switch to the slow and quick mode that has audio selected. Now, in my testing here at the dog park, I did find that in the 120 frames per second mode, the autofocus wasn't as responsive as it is in the 24 to 60 frame per second range. So if you're needing reliable autofocus, I would encourage you to shoot in 60 at 4K rather than 120, but it still worked pretty well having autofocus in 120. and I find it to be pretty impressive slow-mo. I mean, see for yourself. Now, once you get into the high frame rate modes, you do lose that dual gain output of the sensor, and that's really what makes the sensor look so good and the image look amazing on this camera. But when you're shooting slow-mo, people aren't really thinking about those things. I shot some examples with Toy standing in this very contrasty area, and when you zoom in on those images, you can see the difference between the DGO option in the 4K 24p version compared to the 120. But again, it's still a clean image overall, and it's totally usable, but keep that in mind if you're wanting the optimal image quality. Now, 120 frames per second is not the maximum frame rate. You can go up to 180 frames per second if you're able to deal with a Super 16 crop. So the image obviously isn't going to look as sharp and crisp as the 4K, but if you need those extra frames, you can do it in the 2K mode. Nathan Ing asks, what's the rolling shutter like? Because of the DGO sensor in this camera, the camera's having to work twice as hard to produce one image. So the rolling shutter performance isn't as good as it is when it's in the non-DGO mode. For example, in 120p, the rolling shutter performance was dramatically better than in the standard 4K. However, it's nothing like what we were used to from the old DSLR days. Now you may be wondering, can you vlog like Casey Neistat on the Canon C70? The answer is yes, of course you can. In fact, this camera is pretty perfect for vlogging because it has a flip screen and it doesn't interfere with the mic. See, look, the mic jack is here and the flip screen's here. I always love this, and Toy knows this. Now, I know this is totally ridiculous and uncalled for, but there are some people out there that want to be able to film themselves. Not only can you film this way, but because of the thread mount here on the side, you can actually film in portrait mode. And that's one thing that I've seen a lot of people not talk about on this camera because us filmmakers cringe at the idea of it. But let's be honest, so many people are making stuff for social media these days, and the fact that you can mount the camera with a built-in 1/4-20 thread on the side makes it really practical to use for those moments where you're doing portrait video. Not only that, but this camera actually automatically changes the menus of the screen so that you can see everything in line and it's not sideways when you're filming. It's kind of humorous to even think of, but you actually can use this if you're a social media influencer. Adam Grant asks, what is the ease of usability? It's so small and it seems like it's good for YouTube or quick commercial work. Absolutely. In fact, in our use of this shoot, we really loved the form factor. It's really the size of the 1DC or a 1DX, and that is a bigger camera compared to a hybrid camera like the A7S, but it's still small in terms of cinema cameras. It's got everything you need with the built-in NDs. It's got the mini XLR ports, which I wish were full-sized, but it is something you can get away with adapters and things. So you get plenty of time on each battery, like 6 hours. So you really only need like 2 batteries for a full day's shoot. And the only thing that is missing, in my opinion, is some sort of EVF system. I would have loved to seen the EVF in the C200 on this, but I think because of the price and because I wanted to keep it small for gimbal use, they took it off. Otherwise, the build of this thing is fantastic. It's the marriage between a DSLR and a cinema camera put together, and I really love that. It's got the flip screen, but the form factor and ease of use of a DSLR. Here's an interesting fact. Humans are the only creatures that blush. Want another one? The wood frog can hold its pee for up to 8 months. Wow. These facts are made possible by our sponsor today, Squarespace.com. In fact, I've decided to create a website custom to this video with over 100 random facts that you can learn. I built this website using Squarespace's incredible template and organizer, and if you're in need of a random fact website or a portfolio or custom domain, Squarespace is the place to go. Squarespace.com/IndieMogul gives you 10% off your first purchase, and you yourself can learn that rabbits can't puke, the human body literally glows, or that chewing gum boosts concentration. In fact, you may not realize it, but I'm chewing gum right now. No, I'm not. So head over to squarespace.com/IndieMogul and claim your 10% discount now and start researching some of the random facts that we've decided to put on our website, linked down in the description below. We'd like to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. By the way, we have an incredible game show video that we've done with iJustine and Armando Fiera, so make sure to subscribe and see that. Plus, if you want to see some other comparison videos, we've done some other ones we'll put in a playlist down here that you can watch with the A7S and the Alexa.